Welcome to Moving Beyond Burnout. Today, I am here with a special guest, my mom, to talk about mental health across the generations. Um, and so, right now, we are in the midst of Mental Health Awareness Month. And then we are also about to celebrate Mother's Day, which is on Sunday. And so I thought it would be great to have an intergenerational conversation about mental wellness, about stress management for this episode of Moving Beyond Burnout. So if you're joining me for the first time, please like the video, please share it with people in your community and in your networks, and please subscribe to the YouTube channel and my newsletter. I publish a newsletter every 2 weeks about relevant topics as it relates to burnout and mental wellness. So today's topic is Mommy and Me, a generational discussion on mental wellness and stress management. So I am here with my mom, and you say hi, Mommy.
Hi, everyone. Thank you
And
for
you have
having me.
there's something playing in the background. I don't know if you hear it.
Okay. I will try to mute it.
Okay. I think it was the ice cream truck. I think it was the ice cream truck in the neighborhood, and that's what the chime is. But my mom will be joining me here. And so, if you have any questions as it relates to Black women's mental health across the generations, please leave your comments in the chat. Please leave your questions in the chat because at the end, my mom and I will answer questions about generational wellness and stress management. So, can you unmute your mic?
Okay, I'm
Okay,
unmuted.
we're good now. So I wanted to kick things off with Black women's mental health in the 80s and 90s. So, Mommy, you're a boomer on the edge of being a boomer in Gen X.
Yep.
So I would love for you just to tell me about like what was going on in the 80s and 90s. Where were Black women at? What were some of the things that they were experiencing? And kind of what was the conversation around mental health at that time?
Okay. So, really, from what I really recall, is there really wasn't a lot of discussion um, openly about mental health. There was more quiet, even in a family setting. People really didn't label things that were going on as mental health. Terminology would be used as that person is off. Something's off with that person. So my experience was that it really wasn't talked about in public settings that we see now. It wasn't necessarily embraced as something that was part of your wellness, just like how you get a physical to make sure that you're well and get everything checked out. Mental health was not even discussed from a health perspective as being something that you should be conscious of, making sure that you were well in.
And what were some of like the challenges that Black women were facing that could impact their mental health in the 80s and 90s?
In that time period, I know just being a fairly married, young mother, also entering into the workforce and beginning to build a career. During that period, I was also in the Army Reserve. So there was a lot for me to balance. And I saw a lot of the women, especially like in my reserve unit, balancing the same things. There were single moms. So I would say those were some of the struggles. Some, of course, the single moms, they were the main breadwinner. And a lot of times the conversations would be around, I'm coming to drill, but I have to get back, because I got to pick up my kids from my mother who's keeping them, and or sometimes going to work. I myself, a lot of times, would go to my reserve duty, get off, and go to work in a retail store, and then be back up at the same morning. So there was a lot um, that I think were struggles that led to burnout. But you were just going through the motions and trying to survive. Build a life for your family, build a career for yourself. So I think those are actually still some of the same things that are prevalent today.
And it's interesting what you're sharing is also, I think, with something that Black women are trying to grapple with now, based on some of the things that we may have seen our mothers, our aunts, our grandmothers carry. So, how did people, or how did you, or how did people that you know of cope with the things that you just talked about? So, stress from work, family
Yeah.
responsibilities, all those different things. Where were Black women going to get help? How were they coping, or were they not coping at
I
all?
think I think the main thing that, at least for me and the people that I were around, our faith was the foundation. Being part of a faith-based community, a church, that was where you could go, um, because you were among other Black families, Black women. Um, I was for many years, I was part of a church where the women's ministry was really strong, and they kind of brought me along and helped me grow. So that was the main place, I think, that a lot of women leaned on in terms of actually being part of a faith-based community. I know I was not part of a sorority, but I have friends and heard other people talk about that being their community, their sorority involvement. Um, one of the other things I wanted to elaborate on, as far as a struggle um, during that time period, and it's definitely still a challenge now, is in particularly in the workplace for Black women. I've been in several jobs, and I've talked with friends and heard people use the term of, you come in, or you're designated as the cleanup woman. So in the workplace, you're the cleanup woman. You're coming in to touch things and do things that nobody else wants to do, desires to do, um, or expected. If you are, especially if you're in a leadership role, you're expected to get things on the right track. And then you're not necessarily afforded the same opportunities as male counterparts, be it Black men or white men, and especially white women. So that's another struggle when it comes to, you think that you're getting an opportunity, and even made to be felt like you should be grateful that somebody kind of threw you a bone, um, for this opportunity that you're getting. And then it's the additional expectation that you can't mess up. You're looked at as having to perform probably 2 to 3 times better than someone else, and you watch other people barely do, or have the level of responsibility that you may have, and they don't have the same level of accountability. So that's definitely something that I experienced, especially as I moved up in leadership roles. And one of the unfortunate things that I have experienced is, um, some of the worst scrutiny and challenges I had were at the hands of other Black women in leadership. That was like another layer of scrutiny. And that was some of my worst supervisors were Black women. So as I grew in leadership, I have been very intentional in not being that one, in repeating the same cycle, because there are um, too many people that are entering the workforce or somewhere in their mid career, and they need a good example or a strong example that, where yes, they're challenged, but they're not torn down.
Yeah, thank you for, bringing that up. I think what you really just described is what we call the superwoman schema, with Black women, is like, you know, having to have it all together, taking the bare minimum, sacrificing it, having to perform to the point that your full, humanity is not always honored and respected. And you're just supposed to be grateful for what you have and to not desire more or to demand more. And then also, like you're saying, in the workplace, those things are still prevalent today. Dr. Kamani, who I've told you about, who
Mm-hmm.
has Black women leaving toxic jobs, she talks about, the all skin folk and kinfolk, and how, you know, even within the
Absolutely.
Black community, there can be, harm that happens in within the community that also impacts our outcomes and also impacts our mental health. So I appreciate you for bringing that up, and really focusing on why, why those issues persisted then and how they're persistent now and how you're trying to, rise above those things. So tell me about the first time that you heard about you heard the word mental health. And what were some of the things that you initially thought about it? And did you think it could be something that could be helpful for you?
Yeah. I don't really recall it specifically being, the discussion or how it was presented being labeled as mental health, but I was in my early to mid 30s. Um, and it was the first time that I really can recall a Black woman sharing, what they had in terms of mental health challenges, and that sharing that they were in therapy. It was actually the first lady of, the church that I belonged to, and I believe it was a women's retreat. So it was a, I would say, a safe space when this was shared amongst other women. And I think because of her role as the first lady, um, and her sharing in that way, in a very vulnerable way, it kind of gave at least me, and I think a lot of other women who were in attendance, a sense of, oh, okay, it's okay to talk about mental health, and that, you're struggling, and that you are seeking therapy, and that you're in the process of, being in therapy. um, so that was my first, real introduction to the topic of mental health, and actually knowing someone who was, open about, their struggles and the fact that they were seeking therapy. So I think her transparency gave a lot of us permission to acknowledge that mental health is a thing. And
Yeah.
I can even remember, not too long after that, I began to kind of look at things differently, even to the point of, saying I'm taking an R&R day and taking sick leave, and, not having to feel like I had to provide an explanation. It's just, I need an R&R day.
And what does R&R stand for?
Rest and relaxation.
Oh, okay. That's the one I haven't heard of. Rest and relaxation. Okay.
So that's a 90s term,
Oh,
80s
that's a
term.
90s term. Okay. So y'all, I was born in the early 90s. And so there's some things I understand and some things I don't understand. So, okay, an R&R day. And I appreciate what you said about having a having someone who could model that it was okay to seek support with your mental health. And I think that has been what has helped so many other Black women who are looking for support with their mental health is for the sharing of stories and
Mhm.
experiences, and to also have that relatability, like, hey, this is somebody I know of, and
Yeah,
they went to seek mental health care and treatment. And I'm cool with them, right? So that's something that could also help me as well. And so that, like, that modeling really does work. So I really encourage people who are watching today that if you are open about your mental health journey, to share it with others, because you never know how sharing your story could open up the door for healing for other people. And
absolutely.
were you going to say something else?
Yeah, and also like on more personally, you know, it became mental health became more personal for me when you had your first the summer you had your first mental health crises. And that same summer, we were also beginning testing for your brother, who was ultimately diagnosed with Asperger's, or being on the high functioning end of autism. And so that really brought it like in the house, as this is something that now as a family we have to manage and learn to understand. So just it wasn't overnight. It took several years in just really having good support from people, even if they weren't quite sure, what to specifically say. Okay, this is something to think about. It was just, I'm praying for you. What is it that I can do to help? Just knowing that had having people in the corner. And one of the things that from that point on, um, like what you just said, sharing information with people, in particular as your brother went through elementary, middle, and high school, and just sharing with people that, hey, here's some resources in the county, here's this event that's going on, and being like the resource for someone else to kind of point them in the right direction or in a direction at all, was really rewarding, I would say, too, to be able to, one, not have any shame attached to, what we were experiencing as a family. And I think that's the other part that why mental health wasn't talked about as much until really you got into the 2000s. I think COVID is what tipped the iceberg in terms of changing the trajectory of how mental health is talked about and acknowledged. I think you're on mute now.
Sorry. So it sounds like for you, just being able to share with others was also helpful as you were learning about how to navigate mental health concerns within a family, and kind of help to bring down some of that stigma and even uncertainty, or for some people, shame as relates to
Mhm.
having children who are dealing with mental health concerns. What are some of the challenges that you see Black women facing today, that you or women in your generation experienced? I know we touched on a little bit of
Mhm.
that earlier, but what are the things that you are seeing that aren't changing or haven't really changed in terms
Mhm.
of what Black women are facing in their mental health?
Yeah, the things that I mentioned before about the challenges in the workplace, the balancing, especially I'm a federal employee, so we are on site and present, where we had this period of time where you actually worked in a normal way during COVID and post initial years post COVID, and people were regaining their family time. But what I'm seeing right now is the struggle of um, kind of having some of that snatched away from you, um, in terms of being able to be present for your family. So I think in a different way, the struggle with trying to balance work, raising children, build a career, it still exists, but in a different way now. Social media is probably the biggest change that I think is different. That women in my generation, we didn't have social media. We were, we had of course computers, but it was like dial up. um, so the influence of social media, I think, really, um, can be it's good, but at the same time, too much of it, I think, is where women today can begin to struggle with their self-image, um, self esteem, start questioning their value because they see all of these posts with people that they know and sometimes people that they don't know, and there's a feeling of I should be doing, or I should have done, um, how I'm feeling left out. So I think social media is one of the game changers in terms of its impact, with mental health, and especially in the climate that we're in right now, um, dialing back from social media, and really monitoring how much of it you expose yourself to, how much time you spend on it is really, a way to preserve your mental health.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate you bringing up social media because I do believe that that is it's, social media gets pinned as the evil of a lot of what we're dealing with now. But it is a big difference in terms of
Mhm.
how social media shapes our mental health in good ways and then also detrimental ways. So social media has helped in terms of visibility with mental health, but it's also been a challenge in terms of our relationship to technology and how we view ourselves and what we're influenced by, which is what our generation is really experiencing today. And I'm I guess a earlier millennial.
Yeah.
So when I was in middle school going to high school is when MySpace came out. And when
Hmm.
MySpace was out, we were just like creating your little GIF, your little page, it was like you had friends, but it wasn't an image thing. It wasn't what it is today. And then
Yeah.
to see Facebook come out and then Instagram come out and then TikTok and seeing all these changes, have definitely shaped, our experiences growing up that are different than, before then, where you had to see people in person, you had the telephone, you had events. There were there was more social engagement and social
Yeah.
connection outside of a technological device, which helps with so many different things developmentally, but also socially. That's also just as important for your mental well-being.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say also, as far as advice that I would give, is if you can find a community of, Black women that you can trust that will uplift instead of tear down, there are people in communities out there. I'm fortunate to be, have a couple of communities that I'm part of, but I think, you can't do this alone. And I think that's the other thing that, Black women struggle with is sometimes they're forced to do some things alone, but there are some things that you can share. And then just being willing and open to asking for help. I didn't always ask for help, um, for various reasons, not necessarily being confident, didn't want to show, let someone know that, hey, I'm struggling with things. I'll figure it out on my own. But I think being open and, to asking for help, being willing to receive the help, it may not necessarily come in the form that you are looking for it in, But if you're open, then you may get the help that in an unexpected way. And the whole Superwoman, the cape, it needs to stay on the shelf. We have put on capes, masks, and other accessories that we were never meant to wear. So that's the other advice that I would have.
And can you talk a little bit more? But before I go into that, if you all have any questions for my mom or me regarding what we're talking about today, please leave them in the chat or in the comments. We just have 2 questions left before we'll open the floor to you all. So if you have a question, you have some thoughts, comments, please leave them in the chat. But I want you, mom, to just maybe a little bit personally, if you could just tell me more about like your evolution in terms of your relationship to stress, to mental health and well being. I've seen a transformation with you over the past couple of years, but I would love for you to kind of talk about like where you were maybe years ago and where you are now.
Yeah, so years ago, and I think what you've been exposed to kind of shapes how you respond. So being in the military, I would say that that actually shaped me to kind of like, you're going to press through this. Almost like for a long time, I had the mentality of, I can't fail. Um, being kind of feeling like I came from a lot of experiences where like I was the underdog or not necessarily like the first thought of from a self-esteem standpoint that impacted how I made decisions to maybe take on more than what was necessary or um, stay with something longer than I needed to stay with. But having that military background too, I think also kind of influenced it. It's a good characteristic to have to like really be dedicated and want to see things through. But there, as I've gotten older and just, I can say it now because I'll be 60 this year. I've lived a little bit. I can see where, there were definitely points where I held on to things too long or got too involved in things that I didn't necessarily need to be involved in to that degree, really to kind of prove to myself that I had value or prove to someone that I had value or something to offer. So that is an area that I've evolved in terms of being comfortable with saying no because it is a complete sentence and not having an explanation necessarily behind my no. Um, and just asking for help, like I said before, being in a space now where I will ask for help early and sometimes often, and lean on the people that, people will say, hey, I support you. I put people to that test of, you said you can, do you need anything? And I've called people on that. Yes, I need this. So being more comfortable to ask for the help and, use the resources that are around me um, is a big part of, I would say, how I've evolved and just not trying to squeeze things into squeeze different things that I take on or choosing not to take on and thinking, oh, I can do this, it'll work, I got enough time. So just really like looking at um, one phrase that I've been recently exposed to is time optimism, being more optimistic about, what time does it take? What is it going to take out of me if I do something or if I engage? And sometimes just kind of pulling back earlier and recognizing when I need to do that.
Can you tell me about some of the groups that you're a part of that have been helpful? I'm surprised you didn't mention them.
Um, yeah, I was going to actually mention then it's actually one of the ways that I I think it segue into the other area that you were going to talk about. But um, of course, the church has always been a constant foundation, and being part of the women's ministries and building relationships with women outside of, like, let's just say a ministry, but having those friendships, and having some really good friends and the groups that I've been part of. One group I joined right before COVID here local in the Waldorf area, realwomenrock.org, led by uh, led by Dr. Trinace Richardson. She That group has been like a lifeline, especially during COVID. That is a space where I've been able to do personal development work on myself and also build my leadership skills. Also, I would say it's a safe space because there's other women that are coming from different backgrounds that you can just be yourself. There's no expectations, whatever title, whatever position you have, it doesn't even come through the door. So I appreciate that environment. And then I joined, and these were investments that I decided I needed to make in myself. I look at them when I decided to join, I looked at I'm investing in myself. So the other organization is called Successful Women's Academy, and that's led by Valerie Burton. She's a renowned motivational speaker. She works with John Maxwell leadership and coach training. And Successful Women's Academy, I'm one of their founding members, and they were formed right around COVID. And that I've been able to work on my professional and personal development there. And just being able to share with other women and encourage them. We encourage each other. We call each other Swisters. Um, but each month, having something I can focus on with the information that's provided to the group. And it's helped me really get clear about my vision and my purpose, especially in the areas of spiritual health, work, finances, and relationships. Um, it's really helped. Both of those groups kind of complement each other, and I get to do one virtually all of the time, and then the other that's local. I look forward to the in-person sister circles and even the virtual sister circles in the annual gatherings that we have. But that's my community. Um, Outside of family, outside of church, it's kind of my special place that I know I can kind of like get energized, have people pour into me. I get to pour into people.
Okay. Yeah, I like both of those groups because you're able to build community, you're able to relate to women outside of, like you said, the titles, and just to show up as who you are and develop your personal interests in your needs and development, because we all need that throughout our lives. And of course, at Sister Afia, we do something very similar where we're maybe a little bit more laser focused on mental health specifically, but that community connection that you spoke of is absolutely necessary. And I think people are really realizing that more and more today than ever. So I have, let me see, two comments. Um, so Mechatran, I know who that is. I have a question. What mental health values or habits do you hope future generations, your children or grandchildren, will carry forward?
Wow, that's a loaded question. I would say being able to communicate, that you are struggling and that you need help. And it doesn't have to be like a major breakdown. It could just be I'm having a tough day, and being, willing to just, say, this is what I need. Um, I think when we think about children and future generations, um, everybody isn't in an environment where they feel safe enough that they can say, this happened at school today, and it's bothering me. And then a parent, or someone in their life, actually taking time to sit down and listen.
Mhm. So being able, what you would want to carry on is young people being able to share their needs or what they're struggling with, and having adults in their lives who listen to their needs and take them seriously and try to support them, and to not be afraid to ask for
Not
their needs or to ask for help.
Yeah, not only that, but I think also one of the things that, I still learning, is a work in progress, but actually the listening part I think is the big thing. And not trying to There's some things that, like, your sister, your brother do, and certainly, some of the young ladies that you grew up with, you all are bold. And I would never do that, or it would take me a really, really long time before I just kind of stepped out there and do that. So I think part of that too is when you are talking about listening, but it's also respecting that they have, someone else is going to have a different approach, and it may not look like your approach, or what you may be comfortable with, but it's still, you don't want to stunt. Like, if somebody is willing to come, and a child especially is willing to be open and come to you, you don't want to throw a bucket of water over, you know, what, and kind of tear down or minimize what they are saying or what they want to do, because then you've lost that connection, and they're not going to come to you, um, in the future. So that I think that's part of what's really important.
And so, as we close, you gave a lot of good nuggets today, from your experiences and the experiences of other women across generations. But what are maybe two pieces of advice that you would give to Black women today who are struggling with their mental health and stress, based off of the wisdom that you've gained from over the years?
Again, don't be afraid to seek help, especially professionally, or opening yourself up to participating in workshops like those that Sister Avia offers, and be comfortable with prioritizing yourself, um, so that you are able to evolve and then have something to pour into someone else. There's a saying, I don't know who coined it, but it goes something to the effect of, you can't pour from an empty well or an empty cup. So you want to keep your cup full, so that you can stay uplifted, and then you can uplift others.
Okay. Um, any other questions? Feel free to put them in the chat. But thank you. Oh, a question for you both from Corey. What is the best advice that you have received regarding your own mental health? I'll go
Yeah.
first.
Yeah.
So the best advice that I've received for my own mental health was to listen to my body. Um, there have been so many moments throughout my life where my body was communicating things to me that, if I would have listened, could have prevented some mental distress from happening. So that's everything from headaches to, tightness in your shoulders, to feeling exhausted and not stopping. And so, in my past, dealing with stress and burnout and other issues with my mental health, some of those things I think could have been less intense if I would have really listened to my body when I started to experience changes, and to seek the appropriate remedies to address some of those challenges. And so that's something that stays with me up until this point, you know, of listening to what my body, what is happening, even down to how I'm eating. Like if I'm going to grab all these carbs, right? Like that is the indicator that that's my go-to when I'm overwhelmed or when I'm not taking care of my home and having food ready, so that I can be nourished throughout the day. So that is probably one of the most important things that I've been
Yeah.
advice that I've received that have helped me with my mental health.
And I think for me, probably the best advice is just to not try to do so much. Um, just not trying to do so much at one time in particularly, and kind of along with you, listen to your body, and do some things in response to what your body is telling you. So one of the things that that as far as prioritizing, like I build in, I have flexible spending money that goes toward me getting at least one massage monthly. So that's me listening to my body, knowing that okay, I need this to help relieve the tension and the stress. So I've prioritized it to making it, this is going to go on monthly. It's scheduled, um, and I intentionally put money aside, because we put money as Black women. We put money. We can spend some money on some things.
Mhm.
If we go into a beauty supply, we're going to spend at least $50. So it's just really like looking at what's important. Where is your money going? Is it doing something that's going to make you feel good, and that's going to be lasting, for you. So I think those are just some other things that I would share.
Well, thank you, Corey, and thank you. It's D'Angelo who put the question. He has another avatar, but
Oh.
for the question. And thank you, sweet Queen Diva and Miss Regina. Thank you all for your comments. This is the best, most authentic conversations I've heard in a while. I'm proud of you both. Love you, ladies. We love you too, Miss
We love
Regina.
you too. Miss Regina's part of my tribe that supports me.
And then Sweet Queen Dude said, "Thank you so much. Knowing we matter is a strengthening way to heal our brokenness and grow." So thank you all for tuning in. So I want to thank my mom for being here today and being game for this, because I was like, hey, I have this idea. Would you like to do this live stream with me? And she was willing. So I'm grateful to her for taking the time to be a part of Moving Beyond Burnout today and for sharing her experiences, her wisdom. I've learned so much from this conversation. And I'm going to be taking a mini hiatus. So I'll be back on June 5th. Um, and June will be one full year that I've done Moving Beyond Burnout, which I can't believe. So almost every 2 weeks for a year, I have been here, sharing different information about burnout, different topics that are relevant. And so I'm going to take a little bit of time off for myself and just to think about, how I want to use this platform moving forward. So thank you all so much for sticking with me through this time. And I hope that what we talked about was helpful today. So as usual, please like the video. Please share this video, whether you're on YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram. I'll be uploading it shortly with others. Mother's Day is coming up. It's Mental Health Awareness Month. This is a perfect time to have more intergenerational conversations about mental health. I believe that is one of the things that we're missing in our community, is the passing down of wisdom and experiences. So I will see you all in a couple weeks. I hope you have a great Mental Health Awareness Month and a great Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. And if you're not a mother, acknowledging all the contributions of women. So take care of all of you and be well.
Take care. Bye bye.